You know that moment when someone says something so cruel it changes everything in an instant. I was standing in my sister's beautifully decorated living room, watching my 13-year-old niece unwrap the $850 iPhone I had bought her for her birthday. 30 family members surrounded us all, smiling and celebrating. Then she looked right at me, giggled, and said those words that would haunt me forever. What happened next shocked everyone in that room, including myself. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who show you exactly how little you mean to them. Before I dive into what my niece actually said and how I responded, I want to know where you are watching from today. If you have ever been the family member who gives everything but gets nothing in return, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will show you exactly what happens when kindness gets mistaken for weakness. Trust me, you will want to see how this family learned the hard way that some people are not as disposable as they think. My name is Charlotte, and for the past 15 years I have been what you might call the family bank. At 34 years old, I work as a software engineer for a tech company in Austin, Texas, making a comfortable six-figure salary that allowed me to live well and help my family generously. Being single and childless, I always felt it was my responsibility to step up whenever relatives needed financial support. It started innocently enough when my older sister Jennifer lost her job during the recession. I helped with her mortgage payments for 6 months until she got back on her feet. When my younger brother Marcus needed money for his wife's medical bills, I wrote a check without hesitation. When my parents wanted to renovate their kitchen but could not afford it, I quietly paid the contractor directly. Over the years, being the family's financial safety net became my identity. Jennifer, who is 37, had always been the golden child in our family. She married her high school sweetheart David when she was 22, and they had their daughter Sophia 2 years later. David worked in construction management, but his income was unpredictable depending on project availability. Jennifer had tried various jobs over the years, but never found anything that paid well enough to significantly impact their household budget. As a result, I became deeply involved in their financial stability. I paid for Sophia's private school tuition, covered their health insurance premiums, when David's company did not offer benefits, and regularly bought groceries and clothes for their family. When they wanted to take family vacations but could not afford them, I would book and pay for everything, just happy to see my niece experience new places and create memories. Sophia had grown up knowing that Aunt Charlotte was the source of most of the nice things in her life, but somewhere along the way, that knowledge had transformed into entitlement rather than gratitude. By the time she turned 13, she had developed an attitude that the expensive gifts and financial support I provided were simply what she deserved, rather than generous gestures from someone who loved her. Jennifer and David had never taught Sophia to appreciate what I did for their family. In fact, I started noticing that they would often take credit for things I had paid for. When Sophia got accepted into the expensive private school, Jennifer would tell people about the sacrifices she and David had made to afford the tuition. When they went on vacation to Hawaii, David would post pictures on social media talking about how hard he had worked to give his family such experiences. The dynamic in our family had become so skewed that my financial contributions were expected rather than appreciated. My parents would call me when they needed help with unexpected expenses, assuming I would handle it. My siblings would make plans that required my funding without even asking me first, just assuming I would cover whatever they could not afford. But the most troubling development was how Jennifer had started talking about me behind my back. I began hearing from other relatives that she would make comments about my single status, suggesting that I was lonely and trying to buy love from the family. She would tell people that I was probably jealous of her marriage and children, and that my generosity came from a place of desperation rather than genuine care. These comments hurt deeply because they completely misrepresented my motivations. I was not trying to buy anyone's love. I was sharing my success with people I cared about because I thought that was what family did for each other. I had no idea that my kindness was being interpreted as weakness, or that my generosity was being mocked privately. The tension came to a head when Jennifer announced that she wanted to throw Sophia a big 13th birthday party. She had seen elaborate celebrations on social media and decided that her daughter deserved something equally impressive. The problem was that the kind of party she envisioned would cost several $1,000s money they simply did not have. Jennifer called me 3 weeks before the party date, explaining her vision for Sophia's celebration and casually mentioning that she would need my help to make it happen. She talked about hiring a professional event planner, renting a venue catering for 50 people, and hiring a DJ. The way she presented it, my financial participation was not a request, but an assumption. I agreed to help because I wanted Sophia to have a memorable birthday, but I also decided this would be a good time to give her something special from just me. I had noticed she was still using an old phone that barely functioned, and I knew she had been wanting the latest iPhone for months. I decided to surprise her with the $850 phone as my personal gift, something that would be from me alone, rather than blended into the overall party expenses. The week before the party, I spent hours researching the best phone plan options and accessories to go with the iPhone. I wanted everything to be perfect. I even had the phone engraved with her initials and the date, thinking it would make the gift more meaningful and personal. I imagined her excitement when she opened it, her gratitude for such a generous gift, maybe even a genuine hug of appreciation. The party was everything Jennifer had envisioned and more. Their backyard was transformed with professional decorations, string lights, and elegant table settings. The caterer had prepared a feast that looked like it belonged at a wedding rather than a teenager's birthday party. The DJ had set up an impressive sound system, and there was even a photo booth with props for the guests to use. I arrived early to help with last-minute preparations, wearing a new dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. I was genuinely excited to celebrate Sophia and to see her reaction to all the effort that had gone into making her day special. The guest list included about 30 people, mostly family members, but also several of Sophia's friends from school and their parents. As guests began arriving, I noticed how Jennifer was basking in the compliments about the party. Everyone was impressed by the elaborate setup, the quality of the food, and the overall atmosphere. Jennifer was graciously accepting praise as if she had personally planned and paid for everything herself. David was equally comfortable taking credit, talking about how important it was to them to give their daughter the best celebration possible. When it came time for presents, Sophia sat in the center of the group, while everyone gathered around to watch her open gifts. She unwrapped items from various relatives and friends, thanking each person politely, but without much enthusiasm. Most of the gifts were typical teenage items, like clothes, makeup, and gift cards. Then she picked up my carefully wrapped box. I had spent extra time on the presentation, using expensive wrapping paper and a beautiful ribbon. As she began unwrapping it, I felt a flutter of excitement in my stomach. This was going to be the highlight of the gift opening, the moment that would make all my generosity over the years feel worthwhile. When Sophia pulled the iPhone box out of the wrapping paper, there was a collective gasp from the crowd. Several people immediately commented on how expensive the gift was, how lucky Sophia was to have such a generous aunt. She opened the box and pulled out the phone, examining it with what I initially interpreted as amazed excitement. But then something shifted in her expression. Instead of the gratitude and joy I had expected, I saw something else entirely. She looked up at me with a strange little smile, then glanced over at her mother. Jennifer was smiling too, but there was something knowing in her expression that made me uncomfortable. "Wow, Aunt Charlotte," Sophia said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Another expensive gift. You really do not know when to stop, do you?" The comment struck me as odd, but before I could respond, she continued. "Mom was just saying yesterday how you always go overboard because you do not have your own family to spend money on." A few people laughed nervously, but I could feel my cheeks burning. Jennifer was still smiling, not correcting her daughter or redirecting the conversation. If anything, she seemed to be encouraging Sophia to continue. Then Sophia delivered the blow that would change everything. She giggled that innocent teenager giggle that somehow made her words even more cutting and said, "Mom says if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice because all anyone really cares about is your money anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. Every single person in that backyard heard what she said. Some people looked shocked, others embarrassed, but several relatives actually laughed as if it were a harmless joke. Jennifer's smile never wavered. David looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. My parents, who were sitting nearby, acted like they had not heard anything unusual. But I heard every word, and I felt something inside me break completely. This was not just a thoughtless comment from a teenager. This was a calculated cruelty that came directly from conversations Sophia had heard between her parents. Jennifer had been teaching her daughter that my value to the family was purely financial, that my presence meant nothing beyond what I could provide monetarily. I sat there holding my breath, waiting for someone to correct Sophia, to defend me, to acknowledge how inappropriate and hurtful her comment had been. But the moment passed, and the conversation moved on as if nothing significant had happened. People began chatting again, Sophia continued opening other gifts, and the party resumed its cheerful atmosphere. I managed to stay for another hour, mechanically participating in conversations and smiling when appropriate, but my mind was racing. Every interaction felt different now. When relatives talked to me, I found myself wondering if they were thinking about my money, rather than actually enjoying my company. When Jennifer hugged me goodbye and thanked me for making the party possible, her words felt hollow and manipulative. That night, I went home to my quiet apartment and sat in my living room replaying the entire event. The more I thought about Sophia's words and the family's non-reaction, the angrier I became. This was not about teenage insensitivity or a single thoughtless comment. This was about years of being taken for granted, having my generosity twisted into something pathetic, and being reduced to nothing more than a source of funding. I spent the weekend going through my financial records, adding up exactly how much money I had given to various family members over the past 15 years. The total was staggering. Between tuition payments, mortgage help, vacation funding, medical bills, home improvements, and countless smaller expenses, I had given my family over $200,000 of my hard-earned money. And according to my 13-year-old niece channeling her mother's true feelings, I was so worthless that no one would notice if I disappeared. By Sunday evening, I had made a decision that would shock everyone, including myself. Monday morning, I woke up with a clarity I had not felt in years. I called in sick to work, then spent the day executing a plan that would demonstrate exactly how noticeable my disappearance could be. I started by logging into my online banking and systematically canceling every automatic payment I had set up for family members. Sophia's phone plan, which I had been paying monthly since she got her first phone 2 years ago, was the first to go. The private school tuition payments that were scheduled to come out of my account twice a year were canceled. Jennifer and David's health insurance premiums, which I had been covering for 8 months, were stopped immediately. The monthly transfer I made to help with my parents' mortgage payment was eliminated. I also called the credit card company and removed Jennifer as an authorized user on my account, a privilege I had given her years ago for emergency purposes, but which had evolved into regular shopping for non-essentials. The streaming service subscriptions I paid for that multiple family members used were canceled. Even the monthly payment for my parents' internet service, which I had taken over when they complained about the cost, was terminated. But I did not stop with the obvious financial connections. I also canceled the home security monitoring service for Jennifer's house, which I had been paying for since they moved into their current home 3 years ago. I called the landscaping company that maintained my parents' yard and informed them that I would no longer be covering the monthly service fee. I even canceled the subscription to the meal delivery service I had been sending to my elderly Aunt Margaret as a way to make sure she was eating well. Each cancellation felt like removing a weight from my shoulders. For years, I had been carrying the financial burden of multiple households without any appreciation or even acknowledgement. Now, within the span of a few hours, I had eliminated every single recurring expense that was not my direct responsibility. The immediate impact was not noticeable because most of these payments would not be due for several weeks. But I knew that very soon, my family would start receiving notifications about failed payments, service interruptions, and canceled subscriptions. They would have to confront the reality of how much their comfortable lifestyle had depended on my financial support. Next, I began the process of removing myself from their lives in other ways. I changed my phone number and did not give the new one to any family members. I deactivated my social media accounts to prevent them from tracking my activities online. I even closed the post office box where I had been having some packages delivered because Jennifer occasionally used my address for purchases when she did not want David to see the delivery. The most difficult part was deciding what to do about work. My job was based in Austin, but I had been working remotely for the past 2 years due to company policy changes during the pandemic. I realized that I could move anywhere and continue doing my job as long as I had internet access. The idea of starting completely fresh in a new place where no one knew me as the family bank was incredibly appealing. I spent Tuesday researching cities where I could relocate quickly and easily. I had always been drawn to the Pacific Northwest, and I found a furnished apartment in Portland, Oregon that was available for immediate occupancy. The owner was happy to accept a remote worker with excellent references, and I was able to sign a lease electronically and arrange to move in within the week. Wednesday was devoted to packing. I realized that most of my possessions fell into 2 categories: things I truly needed and things I had bought but never really used because I was too busy spending money on other people. I decided to take only what I genuinely valued and leave the rest behind. My entire life fit into 6 boxes and 2 suitcases, which felt surprisingly liberating. As I packed, I kept finding items that reminded me of my family's ingratitude. There was the expensive watch Jennifer had given me for Christmas 2 years ago, which I later discovered she had charged to the credit card where I was paying her balance. There were pictures from family vacations that I had funded, but where I was often the one behind the camera rather than in the photos. There was the laptop David had asked to borrow 6 months ago and never returned, claiming his daughter needed it for school. Thursday evening, I loaded my belongings into my car and took one last walk through the apartment I had called home for 5 years. I left behind furniture, kitchen appliances, decorative items, and a closet full of clothes I had not worn in months. On the kitchen counter, I placed a single black backpack with a note attached. The note was brief. If you are reading this, then you have noticed I disappeared. Inside this backpack, you will find documentation of every payment I have made for family members over the past 15 years, organized by person and category. You will also find a forwarding address for my attorney, who will handle any questions about financial matters going forward. As Sophia so eloquently pointed out, no one will miss me anyway, so this should not be a problem for anyone. Inside the backpack, I had indeed placed meticulously organized financial records. Every tuition payment, every mortgage assistance check, every vacation expense, every insurance premium, every subscription fee. I had included bank statements, canceled checks, and credit card bills highlighted to show family-related expenses. The total amount was calculated and clearly displayed on the first page, $203,742 over 15 years. I also included copies of my cancellation confirmations for all the services I had been paying for with effective dates highlighted. I wanted them to understand exactly when the financial support would end and what they needed to prepare for. There were contact numbers for each service provider in case they wanted to take over the payments themselves. Friday morning, I drove out of Austin before sunrise, heading northwest toward my new life in Portland. I felt a mixture of sadness and liberation that was difficult to describe. I was grieving the loss of family relationships that I had thought were built on love, but had apparently been based on financial dependency. At the same time, I felt free from the burden of being responsible for everyone else's comfort and happiness. The drive took 3 days, and I used the time to think about what kind of person I wanted to be in my new city. For the first time in my adult life, I would not be defined by my role as the family provider. I could spend my money on myself, pursue interests I had neglected, and build relationships based on genuine connection rather than financial obligation. The first few weeks in Portland passed peacefully while I settled into my new apartment and explored my new city. I had intentionally chosen not to forward my mail immediately, wanting to create a clean break from my old life. I knew that once my family realized what had happened, there would be attempts to contact me, and I wanted to be emotionally prepared before dealing with that inevitable drama. 3 weeks after my departure, I finally set up mail forwarding, and within 2 days, I received a stack of letters and packages that had been accumulating at my old address. Most were bills and advertisements, but there were several letters with familiar handwriting that I knew contained attempts at reconciliation or manipulation. Jennifer's letter arrived first, postmarked exactly 1 week after I had left Austin. Her handwriting was on expensive stationery that I suddenly realized I had probably paid for indirectly through all the money I had given her family over the years. The letter was 3 pages long and followed a predictable pattern: confusion, denial, anger, and finally bargaining. She started by expressing shock at my sudden disappearance, claiming she had no idea why I would leave without saying goodbye. She insisted that Sophia's comment at the birthday party was just typical teenage rudeness that I was overreacting to. She reminded me of all the wonderful memories we had shared as a family, and suggested that I was throwing away important relationships over a misunderstanding. The second page revealed her growing panic as she began to understand the financial implications of my departure. She mentioned receiving notices about failed payments and canceled services, asking how I expected them to handle these expenses on their income alone. She calculated that they were facing over $1,500 in monthly bills that they had not budgeted for, plus several large annual expenses, like Sophia's school tuition. By the third page, Jennifer's tone had shifted to desperation and attempted manipulation. She apologized for any hurt feelings and begged me to reconsider my decision. She promised that things would be different if I came home, that the family would appreciate me more, that Sophia would be disciplined for her inappropriate comment. She even offered to pay me back gradually for past expenses, though she provided no realistic timeline or plan for how that might work. My parents' letter was shorter but equally revealing. They focused primarily on the practical problems my absence was creating, rather than any emotional impact. They needed my help with their mortgage payment, which was due the following week. They had been counting on me to cover their annual property tax bill, which they had just received. They reminded me that I had always been the responsible one in the family, and that people were depending on me. The most manipulative letter came from David, who had never written to me personally in the entire time I had known him. His approach was to appeal to my sense of family loyalty, while subtly threatening consequences if I did not return. He pointed out that my parents were elderly and needed support, that Sophia was just a child who did not understand the impact of her words, and that my sudden departure was causing stress for everyone. He also mentioned that they had consulted with an attorney about whether I had any legal obligation to continue the financial support I had been providing. The implication was clear: if I did not voluntarily resume helping them, they might pursue legal action to force me to continue. The threat revealed exactly how entitled they had become to my money, and how little they understood about the voluntary nature of my past generosity. But the letter that surprised me most came from Sophia herself. Her handwriting was still childlike, despite her 13 years, and her message was shorter than the others. She apologized for what she had said at her birthday party, claiming she had not meant to hurt my feelings. She said she missed me and wanted me to come home. She even offered to give back the iPhone I had bought her, though she mentioned that it would be difficult because she had already set up all her accounts on it. What struck me about Sophia's letter was not the apology itself, but the underlying assumption that saying sorry would be enough to fix everything. She had been raised to believe that her actions had no real consequences, that adults would always forgive her mistakes and continue providing for her regardless of how she treated them. Her letter showed no understanding of why her comment had been so hurtful, or what it revealed about her family's attitude toward me. Reading these letters in my sunny Portland apartment, surrounded by my own belongings and my own peace, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. My family's panic about the financial disruption proved that I had indeed been more important to their lives than they had ever acknowledged. But their focus on money and practical concerns, rather than the emotional impact of losing me, confirmed that Sophia's cruel comment had been an accurate reflection of how they truly saw me. I decided not to respond to any of the letters immediately. Instead, I spent the next several weeks building my new life and observing how my family handled the consequences of their own choices. Through mutual friends and distant relatives, I heard updates about their struggles to adjust to their new financial reality. Jennifer had to take a full-time job for the first time in years, working at a retail store for $12 an hour. David picked up additional construction projects, often working weekends to try to cover the bills I had been paying. They had to pull Sophia out of private school and enroll her in the local public school, a change that apparently caused significant drama and resentment. My parents were forced to refinance their mortgage to access equity they could use to cover their monthly expenses. They also had to give up several services and luxuries they had become accustomed to, including their lawn care house cleaning service and premium cable package. The adjustment was particularly difficult for them because they had been telling friends for years about how well their daughter took care of them. The most interesting development was how the extended family began to understand the dynamics that had existed for years. Relatives who had praised Jennifer and David for their parenting and family management skills began to realize that most of their comfortable lifestyle had been subsidized by me. Family gatherings became awkward as people started to piece together how much I had been contributing to various households. Some relatives reached out to me directly, expressing surprise at learning about the extent of my financial support and apologizing for not understanding my situation better. They admitted that they had sometimes envied Jennifer's lifestyle without realizing that I was the one making it possible. A few even shared that they had been hurt by Jennifer's condescending attitude over the years, not knowing that she had been living beyond her means with my help. After 2 months in Portland, I felt strong enough to send one response to my family's attempts at contact. I wrote a single letter that I sent to each person who had written to me, explaining my perspective on what had happened and my decision about the future. The letter was calm and factual rather than emotional. I acknowledged that Sophia's comment at the birthday party had been hurtful, but I explained that it was not the root cause of my departure. The real issue was years of being taken for granted, having my generosity expected rather than appreciated, and being reduced to nothing more than a source of financial support. I made it clear that I would not be resuming any of the financial assistance I had been providing. I was not angry or seeking revenge, but I had realized that my money had been enabling unhealthy family dynamics rather than genuinely helping anyone. By always stepping in to solve their problems, I had prevented them from developing the financial responsibility and independence they needed as adults. I also addressed the emotional aspect of their letters, pointing out that most of their concerns were about money rather than about missing me as a person. I suggested that this confirmed Sophia's observation about my role in the family, even though her delivery had been cruel and inappropriate. Finally, I left the door open for future relationship, but only on very different terms. I was willing to rebuild connections based on mutual respect and genuine affection, but I would never again allow my financial resources to become the foundation of family relationships. Anyone who wanted to be part of my life would need to value me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. The responses to my letter were mixed and revealed the true character of each family member. Jennifer's reaction was immediate and angry. She called my new phone number, which I had eventually shared with a distant cousin, and left a voicemail accusing me of abandoning the family during a difficult time. She claimed that I was being selfish and vindictive, that I was punishing innocent people for one teenager's thoughtless comment. Her anger escalated when she realized that I was serious about not resuming financial support. She accused me of deliberately creating hardship for Sophia, suggesting that I was taking revenge on a child. She threatened to tell the entire extended family how I had abandoned them, apparently not realizing that most relatives were already learning the truth about our family's financial dynamics. David's response was more calculated. He continued to focus on practical concerns, suggesting various compromises that might bring me back. He offered to have Sophia write a more formal apology, to attend family counseling, even to sign an agreement acknowledging my contributions to their family. But all of his suggestions were focused on restoring the financial relationship, rather than addressing the underlying issues. My parents' reaction was the most disappointing, because it was the most purely selfish. They were nearing retirement and had been counting on my continued support to maintain their lifestyle. They seemed unable to understand that their response to Sophia's cruelty, which was to do nothing, had contributed to my decision to leave. They focused entirely on their own needs and made no acknowledgement of how I had been treated. But Sophia's reaction surprised me. About a month after receiving my letter, she sent another note that was completely different from her first attempt at apology. This time, she took full responsibility for her comment and acknowledged that it had been cruel and unfair. She admitted that she had heard her parents talking about me in negative ways and had thought it was acceptable to repeat those sentiments publicly. More importantly, she began to understand how her family's lifestyle had been built on my generosity. As she adjusted to public school and a more modest standard of living, she gained perspective on how much I had been providing. Her note expressed genuine regret for taking my kindness for granted and for hurting someone who had always treated her well. I was touched by Sophia's growing maturity, but I also recognized that she was 13 years old and still developing her understanding of complex adult relationships. Her parents were the ones responsible for teaching her how to treat family members with respect and gratitude. Her cruel comment had been a reflection of their attitudes rather than her own independent thoughts. Over the following months, I began to build a new life in Portland that was entirely my own. I joined hiking groups and discovered a love for outdoor activities that I had never had time to explore when I was constantly managing family financial crises. I took cooking classes and learned to prepare meals for myself rather than always eating quick dinners between work and family obligations. Most importantly, I began to form friendships based on shared interests and mutual respect rather than financial need. I met people through work community activities and volunteer organizations who appreciated my company without knowing anything about my income or my willingness to pay for things. These relationships felt lighter and more genuine than the complicated family dynamics I had left behind. I also started working with a financial planner to make better use of my money for my own future. For years, I had been so focused on helping others that I had not adequately planned for my own retirement, my own goals, my own dreams. I began contributing more to my retirement accounts, exploring investment opportunities, and even considering major purchases like a house that I had previously avoided because I was always spending money on family needs. About 6 months after leaving Austin, I received an unexpected visitor. Sophia had convinced Jennifer to drive her to Portland during a school break and they showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was initially annoyed by the boundary violation, but I was curious enough about their intentions to agree to have coffee with them. The conversation was awkward and uncomfortable, but it was also revealing. Jennifer had been forced to confront the reality of how much she had depended on my financial support, and the experience had been humbling. She had gained new respect for how hard it was to manage all the expenses of running a household without external help. She also admitted that she had been wrong to take my generosity for granted and to allow Sophia to develop entitled attitudes. Sophia had matured significantly during the months since I left. The transition to public school had been challenging, but it had also given her perspective on economic diversity and the value of money. She had started babysitting to earn spending money and was beginning to understand the effort required to acquire the things she wanted. She offered a sincere apology for her birthday party comment and acknowledged that it had been cruel and unfair. However, I could sense that part of their visit was motivated by hope that I might resume some level of financial support. Jennifer mentioned several times how difficult things had been, how much they missed the stability I had provided, how grateful they would be for any help I might be willing to offer. I listened politely, but made it clear that our relationship going forward would need to be built on different foundations. I did agree to maintain contact with Sophia as she continued growing up, but with clear boundaries about my role in her life. I would be her aunt who cared about her education, her character development, and her future success, but I would not be her source of funding for extras and luxuries. If she wanted expensive items, she would need to earn them or find other ways to acquire them. With Jennifer, I was willing to rebuild our sisterly relationship gradually, but only if she could demonstrate genuine change in how she viewed me and my contributions. I was not interested in returning to a dynamic where my primary value was financial. If she wanted me in her life, she would need to appreciate me as a person and contribute to our relationship in meaningful ways. The visit ended with cautious optimism but realistic expectations. I made it clear that Portland was my home now, and I had no intention of returning to Austin permanently. I also emphasized that any future financial assistance would be rare-limited and contingent on demonstrated appreciation and respect. Over the following year, Sophia and I maintained regular contact through letters and occasional phone calls. I watched her grow into a more thoughtful and responsible teenager who understood the value of work and the importance of gratitude. She excelled in her new school and developed interests and friendships that were not dependent on having expensive possessions. Jennifer and I slowly rebuilt our relationship, but it was different from what it had been before. She had learned to manage her family's finances independently and had developed new respect for the challenges I had been helping her avoid for years. Our conversations became more balanced, with both of us contributing emotional support and practical advice rather than me always being the giver. My relationship with my parents remained strained because they continued to focus primarily on the financial support they had lost rather than the daughter they had hurt. They made some efforts to rebuild our connection, but their ongoing resentment about having to adjust their lifestyle made genuine reconciliation difficult. As I reflect on this experience now, almost 2 years later, I realize that leaving Austin was the best decision I could have made for everyone involved. My family had to learn financial independence and personal responsibility that they never would have developed if I had continued enabling their dependence. I discovered my own worth beyond my ability to pay for things and built a life centered on my own values and interests. The most important lesson from this entire experience is that genuine family relationships cannot be built on financial dependency. Love, respect, and appreciation must be freely given rather than purchased. When money becomes the foundation of family connections, everyone loses something essential about what those relationships should mean. I also learned that setting boundaries is not selfish or cruel, even when it causes temporary hardship for people you care about. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and allow others to grow into their own strength and responsibility. Enabling unhealthy dynamics, even with good intentions, ultimately hurts everyone involved. Sophia's cruel comment at her birthday party was devastating, but it was also a gift in disguise. It forced me to confront the reality of how my family saw me, and to make changes that improved all of our lives in the long run. Sometimes it takes a moment of painful honesty to create the possibility for genuine growth and healing. Today, I have relationships with family members who value me for who I am, rather than what I can provide. I have financial security that serves my own goals, rather than constantly being diverted to solve other people's problems. Most importantly, I have peace of mind, knowing that the people in my life choose to be there because they genuinely want my company. Have you ever been taken for granted by family members who expected your generosity without showing appreciation? Have you found yourself in the role of family bank, always giving, but rarely receiving? Share your experiences in the comments, because many people struggle with setting boundaries around financial help for relatives. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and finding the courage to put yourself first when necessary. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that their generosity should never be taken for granted. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth as a family member goes far beyond what you can provide financially. Sometimes stepping away is the only way to teach people to value what they had. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next story.